Come on in, guys. Welcome to Idled Out, where we talk all things Survivor. My name is Luke, and today we're talking about Survivor's worst shelters. If you're like me, you probably don't notice the shelters on Survivor too much. We almost always get a montage of the tribes building their shelters in episode 1, then pretty much never hear about them again. I mean, this isn't exactly House Hunters. I'm not going to sit around and admire the mid-century modern design of Irise Shelter or anything like that. Usually you've got a raised platform, an A-frame or some sort of roof structure covered in palm fronds, and you're good to go. What's so hard about that? A lot, apparently. Yeah, the double-decker Island of the Idols mansion, these ain't. Now I know that not everyone's Wendell or Boston Rob. If I were in charge of building a shelter, it would probably look an awful lot like the shelters we're about to see, and people in glass shelters shouldn't throw stones. But I mean, that's kinda why you come to this channel, right? For the stone throwing. All that said, let's dig into the worst shelters in Survivor history. At number 5 is Irise Shelter in Survivor Micronesia. The initial Fans vs. Favorite season sought to answer the age-old question: can a team of eager newbies take down a team of Survivor veterans? The answer is no. No, they cannot. And part of that may be because they had absolutely no clue how to build a livable shelter. Heading into Micronesia, the 10 players comprising the favorites had some 359 days of Survivor experience between the 10 of them, meaning they were able to hit the ground running, create a solid shelter quickly, which gave them an obvious, massive advantage. This group of alleged fans? I'm not even sure they had a combined 359 minutes of watching Survivor. Their shelter, and lack thereof, was a major source of camp drama early on in this tribe. By nightfall of day 1, Irise barely cobbled together a shelter, enduring brutal rainfall with nary a palm frond to protect them. Instead of fixing their shelter's leaky roof, the Irise tribe goes full my apartment manager and just decides they'll not do this necessary repair at all. Kathy, Chet, and Tracy head down to a nearby cliff to just sleep under that instead, only to find Jason beat them to it, and he politely tells them to pound sand. It's this event that splits the tribe in two for good, ostracizing Kathy, Chet, and Tracy, who then build their own way better shelter nearby, inspiring jealousy and awe from everyone else. But Tracy extends an olive branch and actually helps the rest of the tribe renovate their shoddy shelter, bringing a fleeting sense of unity to this tribe. After the swap, Parvati, James, Eliza, and Jonathan are horrified at the absolute squalor they've been swapped into, including a fire pit close enough to the water to be put out by said water.
I'm amazed they're still alive, poor things. They should be dead.
They raze the original Irise camp and build a newer, better shelter, putting an end to the Irise tribe's shelter drama some 5 episodes into the season. At number 4 is Jabiru from Survivor Amazon, who basically had no shelter for several episodes, then cranked out this. Despite winning 4 of the first 5 challenges, at home this tribe was an underrated train wreck. They struggled with the fire, they struggled with the personality clashes, and they really struggled with their shelter. Because Amazon was divided by gender for the first time ever, there was some gender-divided trash talk from the men, making Survivor's first all-woman tribe pretty rootable by default. Add in a bunch of fun and/or strong personalities like Jenna, Heidi, Christy, Dina, and Jean, and you've got a tribe you simply want to see succeed. But if I'm being honest, at nearly every turn, they make some truly baffling decisions. Like on day 2, they're boiling water and washing their underwear instead of building the shelter. Ladies, unless you plan to sell that dirty water to this guy, this is probably a waste of time. By the end of episode 1, Jabiru's basically built nothing at all, spending their first 3 nights in the Amazon jungle sleeping on the ground, which is something I've heard you really don't want to do because of all the terrestrial, nocturnal, creepy crawlies out there, like Matt. By episode 2, things are looking a little better. They're off the ground at least, but they still keep arguing over who should put the palm fronds on the roof, instead of just putting the palm fronds on the roof. In episode 3, Jabiru finally does something smart and elects Dina leader, and they actually finally get something resembling a survivor shelter a week in. There have been uglier, less functional shelters on Survivor, but no tribe spent so long dragging their feet on building a shelter rather than simply, building it. They got it done just in the nick of time, too. Look who's here. From Survivor's first all-woman tribe to Survivor's only tribe to never have a woman on it. At number 3 is the Viveros tribe's shelter in Survivor Exile Island. I'm just gonna say it, this is the most pathetic-looking shelter in Survivor history. How did this happen? Well, Exile Island was divided by age and gender, and this was the younger man's tribe, containing Irise, Austin, Nick, and Bobby. Never mind that Melinda, an alleged older woman at 32, is only 3 months older than Bobby, who's on the young man tribe, but I digress. Apparently, shelter building is not a young man's game. That would be pick up baseball, or whatever this is that Irise makes them do. I'd like to point out that Irise would go on to be one of the saner members of Kasaya. All that energy channeling pays off, resulting in a shelter that looks like a light breeze might knock it over. A cameraman sneezing, a feather landing on the ground nearby. This is truly a sad sight to behold. Easily the worst shelter of all the 4 starting tribes, and the older woman's tribe had a woman who's afraid of leaves on it. An overnight storm makes the young men reconsider their whole living situation, but the 4 tribes were dissolved in episode 2, and the 4 younger men are split up and sent to separate camps. Had the tribal division twist played out for longer than a single episode, I think these guys would have been in a lot of trouble. Although it's also possible they would have gotten it together and built a shelter that doesn't look like it was built by a 6-year-old. I don't know, depends on how much more energy they can channel. Bobby, get in here. We need an extra set of hands. At number 2 is a 2-way tie between Ravu in Survivor Fiji and Lesu in Survivor Edge of Extinction, neither of whom really created a shelter at all. Let's start with Ravu, who I'm not even gonna blame. In Fiji, everyone started together on a single tribe, and, supplied with construction equipment, spend days building the single most luxurious camp in Survivor history. I mean, we're talking the works here. A couch, a hammock, cutlery, plates and cups, and later on, a French press, 3 sets of fishing gear, and a king-size bed. Granted, Boo breaks most of this stuff at one point or another, but they're pretty loaded. At the first immunity challenge, the 19 players are split into 2 tribes in Fiji's very misguided haves versus have-nots tribe division, and the winning tribe, Moto, gets the lap of luxury camp, and the losing tribe, Ravu, gets to start all over with nothing on a new beach. They never even build a shelter, instead just sleeping on some palm fronds on the ground under a cliff face. Utterly exhausted from building the other tribe's camp, their spirits broken from constantly losing to a tribe who's living the high life, and their patience worn very thin by Rocky. I'm guessing that Survivor thought that we'd get some great underdog story out of this, but instead we get a much more realistic story about the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer. Jeff even basically asks Ravu at Tribal Council why they don't just pull themselves up by their bootstraps. Jeff? They're sucking rainwater off leaves to stay alive. Ditto for the Lesu tribe in Edge of Extinction, which is just the Manu tribe minus Wendy. The original Manu tribe was having a pretty rough go in EOE. Now, I'm not sure how, but Manu lost the first 3 immunity challenges despite having challenge god the War Dog on their team, and voted off Reem, Keith, and one other player. But at least the tenuous, and I mean tenuous, alliance of Kelly, Lauren, Rick, David, and War Dog have an easy boot in Big Wendy queued up. Then the tribe switch happens, and in a lovely twist of the knife, these 5 are swapped together to a brand new beach and forced to start all over without their pocket boot or any member of Kama to vote off should they lose immunity. Depleted of energy and morale, like Ravu, they simply throw some palm fronds on the ground and call it good. Too exhausted to bother with a shelter, and I assume figuring that they can run the clock until the merge. Because of the Edge of Extinction twist sending Rick back into the game after he's voted out, and a joint tribal council with new Manu where they're able to force a tie and vote off Wendy anyway, this incredibly kinda sorta all worked out for them, entering the merge with all 5 members intact, despite winning 1 of 5 post-swap challenges. Maybe Lesu is Moru after all. Okay, I'm sorry. What could be worse than no shelter at all? That would be Saboga's misguided, flooded underground log cabin in Survivor All-Stars. So it's episode 3 of All-Stars, and the reward challenge is to build the most impressive shelter in a 24-hour time span. Rupert wants to stand out from the undoubtedly above-ground shelters that Shapera and Mogo Mogo are gonna make, so he proposes that they build an underground log cabin and dig so deep into the sand that you'll be able to stand up in it. Of course, Jerry calls out exactly what will happen immediately. It's way too labor-intensive to reasonably accomplish in the time frame provided, and it will flood the first time it rains. Rupert completely steamrolls the conversation, arguing that he's built houses for 20 years, which begs the question, how many families has he killed? Ethan, of course, recognizes that this idea is completely terrible too, but as a dead man walking on this tribe, the more conflict the better, so he stays silent and let Rupert and Jerry go at it. By nightfall, they're still working on the shelter, hammering nails in the dark, when Ethan notices a massive tree trunk right in the middle of their shelter. In the morning, Jeff brings in construction expert Raffa to judge the tribe's shelters. By this point, Rupert knows his shelter is terrible, but incredibly tries to sell every shortcoming as a positive. Oh, this massive tree stump in the shelter? That's a footrest. All these loose leaves on top, we designed it that way so water can seep through in case we get thirsty. All that ocean water? Did someone say foot bath? Perhaps most pitifully of all, Jeff and Raffa discuss the shelter with an eye shot of Saboga, which doesn't go well. A deflated Rupert watches Raffa completely trash his baby. Watch this, guys. You can actually pinpoint the second when his heart rips in half. And now. Saboga, of course, loses this challenge, and days of torrential rainstorms flood their new shelter, leave them homeless, and completely break their spirits.
Digging into the sand is the dumbest idea I've ever had in my life.
Rupert's infamous shelter has reverberated throughout Survivor history for ages. Gary called back to it in Heroes vs. Villains, and in Blood vs. Water, Tina even laments the loss of Rupert early on because he's so great at building shelters. Wait, what?
But we were counting on Rupert. Rupert is a fantastic shelter builder.
Well, Tina, I remember it differently, and more accurately. Got nothing else for you. To help my content flood the algorithm harder than Rupert's shelter, like and subscribe and I'll get you more Survivor content just like this. Until next time, don't get idled out.